Recovery with Anthony Acampora.
Welcome to the Faith and Recovery radio show. I'm your host, Anthony Acampora. I'm also the director and chaplain at Banyan Treatment Center's Faith and Recovery program. The Faith and Recovery program is a faith-based alcohol and mental health treatment program. It's non-denominational. It's Christ-centered. The program is designed to allow clients to establish or restore their faith and relationship with God while addressing their addiction and mental health disorders. For more information, or if you want a free consultation, 201-538-2754, 201-538-2754 for more info or a free consultation regarding that. Or if you just have questions, we'd love to try to answer them and try to help you out. We have an excellent guest on today. We're so blessed to have her. Her name is Lynda Araoz. She is an author of the book Weight of a Feather, A Mother's Journey Through the Opiate Addiction Crisis. It's a story of her experience while her son was addicted to heroin and her family's struggle to find help for him. It is a story of answered prayer, a demonstration of God's presence in our most challenging moments. Lynda currently staffs a helpline for parents and addicts looking for treatment options and is an advocate for improved treatment services in New York. She is a part-time college professor who has worked as an adolescent faith therapist, a high school English teacher, and a counselor and school district administrator. And man, when I read that and I look at that, which I was actually reading it on the ride down to the studio, which I wouldn't recommend, it's probably not a good idea. But when I do that, I look at it and it speaks out just someone who has an amazing heart and someone who has compassion, all these different things that you're involved in this helpline for addicts and parents. And you can tell, you just talking to you, Lynda, too, you can just tell you have such a passion for this and you have such compassion. So welcome to the show, Lynda Araoz. And Lynda, welcome. Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Okay, well, thank you first for having me with you. It's really a privilege. Well, I think, that was very kind of you to say that about my compassion, but I guess I really have always seen myself as a person who could potentially help another person or give another person a leg up. And that's kind of why I wrote the book. When my son went into recovery, I took a breath of relief. And then right after that, it began to nag at me, and I thought, it's just not right that I walk away from this whole experience when I know millions of people are going through exactly what I went through, and it just felt like I should be able to reach out to people, not that I have any answers to anything, but I remember what it was like when I went through that. It's an incredibly difficult time, and I was all alone. My husband and I, there were no groups, so that was kind of why I wanted to do that. And I had another motivation, which is, of course, when someone comes out of recovery, there's still challenges that I wanted to say to people who have, kind of overcome their addiction, that families do heal. There's lots of problems that go on, but families come together. And I wanted to give that kind of a boost to anyone who is just starting out in recovery, is that you didn't burn all your bridges. You just need to build new bridges. So that was kind of my motivation behind it.
That's great. Very well said. Thank you for that. It makes me think of, sometimes people will say, there's a saying, our ministry comes out of our misery, So you go through such pain, whether it's a loved one going through this horrible addiction, or if it's mental health disorders, or whatever the case may be, or if it's the actual person going through it. But out of that pain, out of that mess, becomes a message. And God wants us to tell that message and share that message because, if you look at it, that's, I believe, one of the reasons he allows pain, he allows suffering. As a chaplain at Banyan Treatment Center's Faith and Recovery program, I probably get that question asked more than anything. Why does God allow suffering? If he's so powerful, if he's in control of everything, why would he allow this to happen in this world? And it's a good question. But one of the answers that I give, and I think really what it is, he allows us to go through things. I look back in my life and what I went through. Now, it made no sense going through it, but it does now, because now I'm using all of those experiences and that pain to try to encourage and help other people that are going through the same thing. And the other thing is we develop a compassion for that, which I never had before. I was a director of corporate security. I was an investigator. I had no idea about addiction or depression or any of that stuff. But then when you actually experience it, you look at it in a whole different light and you're able to relate. And the person that's dealing with it is able to relate to you too. You have a better understanding of it. So for all of those reasons, that's why I think we go through a lot of stuff. So whatever we're going through, I would say, ask God, how could I grow from this? How could I learn from this? And how could you use this to benefit your kingdom and other people that are hurting? Right? That's really what it comes down to. But that was
that's a wonderful insight. Absolutely. The other thing that I realized when I was going through it is I was very willing to give part of it up to God. Say, you solve this problem, whatever you want. I don't care. I'm not going to direct it. Go ahead, solve it. But I was not willing to give up timing. Solve it, but do it now. I would have preferred yesterday, but now. So, and that is one of the struggles for parents or any family members of someone who has a substance use problem. Is it's not something that's immediately solved. It's not like, when you have a medical problem, you go to the doctor and you get prescribed something, you get the treatment, you get over it. For most people that I know and other parents that I'm in contact with, it's something that goes on for a long period of time. Right. And that makes a huge difference.
Sure.
But I still believe, and like you, I can look back and say God's timing was perfect.
Yes.
But in my mind at the time, I didn't have that patience. It's like,
absolutely.
I can't take it anymore. I need this help now.
Right.
Now.
Yeah, and we want our will. We want our timing. God, I want it now. I don't want to go through more pain and suffering, but he's using that. He's molding us, right? Like the clay in the potter, like he's molding us into the person that he wants us to be and that we could be. And so we could fulfill that plan for our life. I never thought in a million years I'd be in ministry or involved with anything that I'm doing now at all. I would have never thought that, but God had other plans, and it really, part of that plan was going through all this stuff to get a better understanding. And the reality is faith in God includes faith in his timing. So it's all about his timing, it's not our timing. So let me ask you this, Lynda. It must have been very difficult for you to go back and relive some of these experiences that you had while your son was actively addicted to heroin. So how were you able to cope with that and deal with that pain again and going over it and over? Because that's a stumbling block for people, because they just don't want to talk about it. They don't want to deal with it. They don't want to relive it. But when we do that, there's so many other people out there hurting, and we have to kind of just, you write this book, this, amazing book here. Well, tell us a little bit about that. Like, how was it for you reliving this over and over when you write the book and when you're sharing it to people?
Well, I was actually in the middle of writing something else, and this is a book that no mother would ever want to write. I recognize that. But I began to get this nagging feeling all the time, like this kid kept coming into my mind, and it's like, oh, I don't know if I want to go there. But there was a moment where I realized, maybe this nagging is really coming from God. Finally, it went back to my son, who actually went through the addiction, and he said to me, look, Mom, if you think it's going to help somebody, do it. It doesn't matter that it's about us, do it.
Right.
And so that was kind of my green light to say, yeah, go on, I'll finish the book, I'll send it out, and we go from there.
That's great. That must have made you feel so, reassured and so much better that they kind of signed off on it, endorsed it, and you're not going to be like writing something and then all of a sudden somebody in your family reads it and they're all upset and everything, and it causes all kinds of problems. I wrote a couple of books. One of them was a devotional that I really didn't know I was even writing, because I was a chaplain at another facility, and I was writing things to encourage the clients. and I would just print them out and give them to them. And then I started emailing them, but I ended up writing a devotional. And then I wrote another book. It's called Overcoming Emotional Obstacles Through Faith, and the subtitle is
great title.
Yeah, the subtitle is Navigating the Minefield, MIND. So I knew I was writing a book then, and it was a testimonial, and I didn't go too deep. I mean, there's not everything in there, but a lot of stuff is in there about things that I went through, and it was kind of like freeing almost, because it's like, all right, it's here, it's out there, you know. I don't have really, there's nothing to worry about anymore. Everything is out there in the open. It's you know, the Bible says the truth will set you free, right? So when we speak the truth and we put it out there, especially if we're putting it in a book form and it's getting published and going out to a lot of people, it's out there, you know. And it's sometimes, for me, like I said, it was a little bit kind of a relief and like a freeing process of all of this stuff. There's nothing to hide really anymore, you know. And that's a big thing with addiction.
I get what you're saying, because sometimes we compartmentalize things in our lives. This was my 20s, this was my 40s, this is when I was successful. These are, somehow getting them out gets away from the walls on those compartments, and it's a form of acceptance. I am who I am, and I'm still growing to be someone else, hopefully better.
Exactly.
But yeah, you bring up a good point there.
Well, I love it because the whole thing is geared towards anything that I was able to overcome, or even somewhat overcome, was because of God. And it was applying biblical principles to my life, not just reading them, not just going to church and listening to a sermon, but actually letting them sink into my spirit and applying it. The main one was Romans 12:17, do not repay evil with more evil, is the first line in the passage. And that really hit home with me, because I had things that happened to me and I wanted to pay evil with evil. And a lot of times we do. We feel we're owed that. We're owed to be able to get back and retaliate. And that's our will. And God's will is the total opposite of that. So I kind of had to undo all of this stuff. But when I get people, especially people that aren't strong believers, they might not have any faith at all, and they tell me they read that and how impactful it was and it really helped them, I love it, because there's a verse in each chapter and there's a prayer in each chapter, and it's really all about glorifying God. Because I tried to overcome all of this stuff myself for years, and it was a total disaster. So he was the only way that I was possibly able to do it. So that's why I love when it really touches people, especially non-believers and non-faith people. It's just very inspiring to me. We're going to need to take a quick break, and we'll be back in 30 seconds. Damien's Faith and Recovery radio show. I'm your host, Anthony Acampora. We'll be right back.
Are you struggling with addiction or mental health disorders? Banyan Treatment Center's Faith and Recovery program helps people at the depths of their despair, spreading the word that recovery is possible through the power of Christ.
Cry out to him. Where are you, God? Where are you? I don't feel you. Where's your presence? Why are you allowing this to happen? He already knows our thoughts anyway. We might as well just put it out there.
Program Director Anthony Acampora will help you discover how God can turn your mess into your message. Call Banyan Treatment Center for help now. 888-230-3122. Again, that's 888-230-3122.
Welcome back to the Faith and Recovery radio show. I'm your host, Anthony Acampora, having a great conversation here today with Lynda Araoz, and she wrote an amazing book, and it's called The Weight of a Feather, A Mother's Journey Through the Opiate Addiction Crisis. Boy, that must hit home with a lot of people, because there's a lot of people dealing with this, and I would highly recommend checking this out and getting some insight, some really good information and insight of somebody who went through it and had the courage to write about it and put that out there. And that's you know, the thing of it is with this, which I love this platform, because people could listen to this anonymously. With addiction, with mental health disorders, there's such a stigma, and there's such a shame sometimes. People don't like to ask questions, or they don't like to seek information because they don't want people knowing, really. So if you have things like this where you could listen and get some insight from somebody who went through this horrible situation of addiction, as Lynda did and shares about it, it's a great thing. So encourage you to get that book, and we're going to start back up here at Lynda. Thank you so much for coming on. Let me ask you this, since we're talking about the book. What made you choose that name, Weight of a Feather, as far as its title goes for your book?
You know, it's funny that you asked that because, interestingly enough, the book had that title before I ever, typed a single page to it. It always had that. And it's interesting because it actually relates to an epigraph in the book, which is Psalm 91:4. He shall cover thee with his feathers, and under his wings shalt thou trust. And this is kind of a theme that goes through it. And, of course, it's ironic. A feather really has no weight. But if you think of a feather as symbolic as it is in that verse of someone's care and protection, the weight of trying to protect and care for a child who has an addiction is incredibly heavy. And so, I think it refers to not only, each of us trying to stand by each other and care for each other, going through a horrible, horrible experience, but ultimately that while we were going through that, we were truly under the wings of God.
Yes.
He was not. He didn't walk away, close his eyes, staring at. He was there, and so it kind of has multi levels, but that's how it arrived. It arrived before the book did.
Nice.
Actually, the cover. I saw the cover and the title before I ever sat down to type the book itself.
Oh,
so
wow.
it's a quirky thing.
Well, it's amazing how God does that and how that works. One of the things that, I share with the clients and stuff a lot, and it's universal. Everybody loves this story, the poem, whatever it is, the Footprints poem or prayer. But at the end of it, when it says, when there was only one set of footprints, I was carrying you, and it's so powerful. It always hits home with people because in the natural, we tend to think, because we're dealing with people who a lot of times do abandon us when we're in trouble or walk away from us and all that type of stuff. And here, so we think that with God too. Why'd you leave me? Where were you when all this stuff was going on, while I was so tormented, while I was in such pain? And he's carrying us, right? And that's why it's so powerful. And it's true. It's what he does. He carries us through these storms of life. And again, we don't usually realize it until we look back. We live our life forward and we understand it backward. And so it makes no sense when you're going through all the suffering and the pain at all. It didn't to me when I went through all the pain and suffering, but it does now. And that's God's in the restoration business. He's in the business of dealing with people that are, through whatever reason, bad choices or just things that happen or people that did things to people. You go through so much pain and suffering, and then he's into the restoration. And that's what I love about our faith program at Banyan, because I'm able to see that firsthand, usually on a weekly basis with someone. And it's a client that everybody wrote off and nobody gave a chance. Even their family sometimes wrote them off. And then God gets a hold of their heart and you see them just transform. Like I don't even recognize some of our clients sometimes after a weekend. Their eyes are different, their demeanor's different, they're talking different. And it's a genuine transformation of the heart, and only God could do that. So it's amazing. So
no, that's absolutely true.
Yeah. Let me ask you, in many ways, the story that you tell is not only your story, and oftentimes that happens to family members that are dealing with someone who is suffering with addiction and things. It's also your son's as well, and his story. So how do you feel about writing the book and making his story public? And we talked about a little bit about that earlier, but how is that, to deal with writing about something that's so painful to someone you love so much and putting it out there for anyone to see and read?
Well, we had a couple very, not intense in a bad way, but very deep conversations, because he couldn't read it straight way through. And I find that people either start reading it and they can't put it down, they read it all the way through, or some people read a couple chapters, have to think about it, think how it relates to their life, and read a couple more chapters. He was like that.
Yeah.
And, it's like he wanted to think about it. What did that mean? Because what he said to me, it's interesting. When I was going through it, I didn't think about anyone else except myself and where I was going to get my next fix.
Yes.
I had no thought about what you were going through or what your reaction was. So he said it was an interesting comment, is it's reading some of these things, even though they're about me, are really like reading them new, because I never saw the perspectives of anyone else other than myself.
Yes.
So it was kind of a growing process for him too, and it kind of kindled interesting conversations between the two of us because of that. And in a way, it opened a door for me to give him reassurance, where, he'd start to feel guilt or shame or whatever. And I could then say, look, we survived. We survived. We are here. We're here talking to each other. We have a relationship. People heal. We're not going back there. I'm not holding anything against you. And that, in a way, obviously I don't want to make a parallel between me and God, but, God does that for us.
Yes.
He says, look, I'm not going to hold it against you, what you did, when you were in your 20s and lost. I'm not holding that against you. I'm giving you, the nudge to move on.
That's so powerful and profound, because what you're describing there with your son reading this and getting a real understanding, like a wake-up call of what his actions cost, the cost of that and how it impacted people, that's basically the essence of treatment, because what we try to do in treatment, especially in group treatment, is get them to open up, be transparent, and realize, especially with the families, and we have family sessions and family conferences, because when you're in active addiction, the focus is almost always self. And you're not thinking, it's not that they don't care, they have no conscience, no heart. It's just the nature of the addiction. They don't care about, or they don't even want to think about how much it's hurting other people that they love. And then when that stuff starts to come out, like it does in your book, like you're talking about, or in a group setting at a treatment center, and you start to open up and you start to realize that the groups are so powerful because they all have similar stories. So they're sitting there and someone's talking across from them, and it's like it's hitting someone else, because all of a sudden that stuff's coming back to them, and you get hit with these waves of guilt and shame and all of this stuff, which is good. You want to feel that. You have to go through the pain to heal from it. But what you said about that with your son reading that and having him realize what he was doing, that is the essence, I think, of treatment. And it's so powerful because oftentimes you don't think about it in active addiction. All you're thinking about is self and where am I going to get my next drink or drug or whatever. So that's awesome.
Right.
Thanks for sharing that. That's really good. Lynda, let me ask you this. What advice can you give parents? And you already have given so much great advice, but if you had to say, like, just from what you've gone through, and there's people listening right now that are going through what you've gone through, and they could relate totally to this. So what advice could you give to someone that's, has a loved one that's struggling with addiction, or from your son's perspective, from someone that's actually they themselves struggling with addiction? Now, what could you tell them? How could you encourage them?
Just a couple of things. I think maintaining a relationship is important, and that is so easily broken because part of the disease is that addicts are manipulative, they lie, they're verbally abusive, and it can be painful. And in some cases, that could be something that breaks that relationship, or there's lots of, anger, conflict, whatever. To be able to separate, who is that child that and who is that child that's been impacted by addiction, who is the manipulative, abusive one, and maintain that relationship. Because that rope, it may be thin and frayed, but that rope may be the very thing that helps a person get to recovery and maintain recovery. So
right.
I think that's important, and to not be consumed by all the behaviors, the negative behaviors that are associated with addiction, to the point that you are bitter and resent your own child, or you have no other life other than the one that is involving recovery
right.
or addiction.
Absolutely.
So I think those are a couple of the things, I thought were important. The other thing is, talk can be important, but it's very important to choose the time to have a serious talk.
Right.
Nothing is ever, really communicated in an argument or frustration or anger, but you can really make an impact if you choose those times.
Right. Absolutely. Very well said. Thank you so much. The book is The Weight of a Feather, A Mother's Journey Through the Opiate Addiction Crisis. Thank you so much, Lynda, for coming on. I would love to have you on again. This was so
thank you,
awesome.
Anthony.
Thank you. This was a blessing, and I know it's going to speak to a lot of people's hearts out there. If you or someone you know is in need of treatment, always feel free to check us out on faithandrecovery.com, BanyanTreatmentCenter.com, or you could give us a call, 888-270-5712, 888-270-5712. Lynda, thank you so much. What a blessing. I like to end with Psalm 143:7. He heals the brokenhearted and he binds up their wounds. God bless you and thank you.